It's another Contagious Leadership Podcast show. Lorianne?
Yes,
You pumped?
episode 59.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. We are definitely getting there, and I'm excited to say that we are pretty much booked up for the next 2 or 3 months, but today we have somebody very, very, very special that I've been really excited about, and that is Stephen Shapiro. It is Thursday, 1 p.m., October 6th. Stay tuned. We're going to get into why innovation matters. And to the title, we have Best Practices Are Stupid. We're going to get into this in just a few seconds with our special guest, Stephen Shapiro. We'll be right back. All right. Well, welcome, Stephen. I hope that music got you pumped and ready.
I was dancing here, busting the moves.
Well, yeah, welcome again. Welcome to our Contagious Leadership Podcast. This is our Lunch Talk series, but we have been bringing this program to the market specifically because we want to bring leadership and mentorship skills to the new leaders that are coming up, and we want to expose them to individuals like you. So again, we want to just thank you very much and welcome, Don. Let's welcome Stephen to the show. There we go. Woo! That's it, man. We got a huge studio audience. Anyways, Stephen, awesome. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I don't need to do it. I'd like you to go ahead and introduce our listeners to who you are and a little bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I'm calling in from Orlando, Florida right now. So it's actually sunny and beautiful, which is great. And going back a little bit, I have been in the innovation space for over 25 years now. Started really cutting my teeth in the innovation world back at Accenture. So I founded and led a 20,000 person practice that was focused on innovation and basically worked there for another 5 years. My first book came out in 2001. I've been doing my own thing ever since, helping companies with innovation and culture and collaboration and open innovation, and a whole bunch of other goodies.
Well, one of the things I love about what you've done is you came out of the corporate environment, and what I liked about some of the details you told me was while you were working in these roles, that's when you wrote your first book, correct?
Yeah. My first book, 24/7 Innovation, wrote that while I was at Accenture. They helped support it because, getting a published book always helps a company. So,
sure.
And as it turns out, the day the book came out was the day that I ended up leaving the company and doing my own thing. So it's something which I wanted to do for a long time.
Yeah. We should talk about just about how you left. Because a lot of people are in corporate positions and they want to go start their own thing. I mean, what's a piece of advice that you give people who are like, hey, Steve, I'm thinking of starting my own thing. What's one thing that you share with people?
I think the main thing is if you're working for a big organization, the best thing you can do is make sure you're leveraging the reputation of the organization you're currently with. Whatever organization you're with, it's much easier when you call on somebody and say, hey, I'm with Accenture, I'm with IBM, I'm with whatever company it might be. If you have a conversation with somebody, they're much more interested when you're working for a big company as opposed to when you're on your own. So leverage the brand as much as you can before you decide to make a leap.
Oh, I love that. That's great advice for everybody who's watching and considering starting their own thing. I like that. Thank you. So let's just dive into innovation, because I know your story about how you got into innovation, because I've heard you share your story a number of times with National Speakers Association. But I just think that it's a fun story about how you kind of stumbled into this particular specialty. Can you share a little more?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. At the time, I wouldn't have called it a fun story because it was actually very disturbing to me. So back in the early 90s, so I started at Accenture in the 80s, back when they were Arthur Andersen, Andersen Consulting, Accenture. I saw them through all the name changes. And back in the early 90s, I was one of the leaders of what was called business process reengineering. And basically what business process reengineering was all around is optimizing a company's processes. We would go in and make companies more efficient. The unfortunate thing that I discovered was that when you optimize a company's processes, they tend to downsize the workforce. And I was working at one client, the CEO mentioned that 10,000 people were going to lose their job. And it's like, I knew the numbers, but I didn't have a connection to it until one day I turned on the TV while working at this client, and I saw the devastation that losing their job had on just 3 people. Just the personal impact. And I literally walked off the project the next day after watching that TV show and finding out that people were just devastated by losing their jobs. And I took 6 months to sort of reflect and figure out what I wanted to do. And fortunately, with a lot of help from a lot of people inside of the company, we created this innovation practice. And so it was just a really, it was a powerful time, but it was also to me a powerful lesson of what I want my legacy to be in the business world.
Oh, that's really nice. And also, just like you said, disturbing. But I always find that I'm always fascinated by people's paths on how they get to where they are. So in the just talking about innovation, I mean, like, what do you think, like, what's the one thing that you think companies get wrong about innovation?
Just one thing. Okay. Well, I would say the main thing that if I were to have to choose one thing, it would be they collapse creativity and innovation. They tend to think of them as being the same thing. So when they think about innovation, sometimes they think it's about quantity of ideas. It's about brainstorming. It's about the creative few who might have some, special talents. But the reality is we all are innovative. We just contribute to innovation in a different way. And the reason for that is because innovation is not about the idea. It is actually about the problem or the opportunity that gets turned into a solution that creates value for the customer and ultimately creates value for the organization. And so I think that's a really big mistake that a lot of organizations make, is they believe that we're going to create a suggestion box and get hundreds of ideas. Well, you're going to get hundreds or thousands of ideas, in which most of them are going to be terrible. And then you're going to actually hurt morale inside the organization. So I always love to start with what's a big, important, meaty, juicy opportunity that the organization could work on, rally around, get behind, and then you get people to support that. That's the best way to drive innovation. It's opportunity driven, not idea driven.
Interesting. Opportunity, not idea driven. But
So
many.
go ahead, Lori Ann. So go ahead. Sorry.
Okay.
No,
I just find
you're
that
good.
so many companies say, but this is the way we've always done things. And they want to keep doing things the way that they've always done them, knowing that they need to change, they need to stay current, they need to do something to stay either like ahead of their competition. I mean, like, how do you get people to wrap their heads around the solution, around the ideas, and stay out of
biggest challenge?
This is the way we've always done it.
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, the reason why people get stuck in the way we've always done it is because we're wired. Actually, the human body, where brain is wired, not for innovation, not for change, but survival. And so the brain in its infinite wisdom assumes that anything we did prior to being here today didn't kill us. So whatever we've done in the past is safe. And therefore, we are wired to want to perpetuate the past. And there's just numerous studies that support this. So we're wired as human beings to want to do what we've always done because it feels safer. But I will say that working with organizations, either it's a competitive threat, a technological threat, an economic threat, or even a societal shift that has them sometimes take notice of the need to change. So I think what ends up happening is, in a lot of cases, the people at the top of the organization really do see the need for change. My word for innovation is relevance. We need to be creating organizations that are relevant, and relevant means we create value for the consumer, the customer, the client, the patient in a way that they want it created. And if we're relevant from that perspective, then we won't be a commodity and we'll survive another day.
I love that. You know, Stephen, one of the things I've heard, Gary Vaynerchuk has said this quite a bit. He goes, you should be more concerned about the end result and not so much about the tool, the solution of how to get there, right? And I think a lot of times you look at things like innovation. Let's take, for instance, what we're doing right now. Look at this digital medium. And although it was growing, it got a rapid shot and growth in the market, right? After we all experienced a global phenomenon of COVID. So now everybody had to be more creative and figure out how to conduct business and continue to build relationship through a digital medium. So I love that comment, and I love what you're saying, because to me it feels very much that in a lot of these organizations that really it seems like they're more focused on how they're supposed to get there versus the end result. Is that what you're saying? Is that what you're seeing yourself in this process of working with companies?
I think it's actually a combination of things, though. Here's the reality is we can't predict the future. We can't predict what's going to happen a month from now, let alone a year or 10 years from now. So it's the problem with most innovation strategies, most strategic plans. The issue is they're built on so many assumptions that are actually faulty. So it's the nimbleness of the organization, the ability to try new things, build it, try it, fix it, to be able to try new experiments, bring them to fruition. That is really the key. So it's about the pace of change. So in some respects, it is how the work is done is as important as the end result, because if you create this innovation engine where you're able to sense what's going on in the market and adapt and shift direction, that is a powerful cultural norm that you want to create that allows you to create multiple end results down the line.
I love that. And I would assume with that type of culture that you're bringing, you're also going to have all kinds of new opportunities for new ideas and ways to solve customer issues and customer problems.
Yeah, I mean, we get so enamored with the solutions, but the reality is we should get enamored with the questions. We should get enamored with the opportunity. We should fall in love with the problems. I mean, that's really where we want to start. Because what ends up happening is we very quickly will make a gut check as to, okay, this is a problem, let's develop a solution, and then we'll start implementing that solution. But 99% of the time, the problem isn't the real problem. The opportunity isn't the real opportunity. And so we're moving in the wrong direction quickly rather than just stopping for a second and saying, what are we really doing? How are we going to create the greatest level of value with the least amount of risk and energy? And that to me is really the key with all of this. So again, that's a capability that we want to build inside the organization, is allowing people that time to not just say, we always say, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. But I think that's actually the wrong perspective. There are lots of solutions. There's lots of ideas. I want bigger, better, more important opportunities. That to me is the key. And let's take the time to make sure that they are aligned with the strategic direction of the organization.
Jeez, fall in love with the problems.
Yeah, that's, what's funny, Lorianne, that was
Did
the
you write
same
that
one I
down
wrote
too?
down. Oh, I wrote it down. Fall in love with the problems. I love that. I absolutely
that's a
love.
pretty
Lorianne, do you have a
common-
question for Stephen?
Go ahead, Stephen. What you were going to say?
No.
I was just going to say,
Yeah.
I was just going to say that, when it comes to innovation, that whole idea of falling in love with the problem, that's like design thinking. That's one of sort of the rule 101 for it. So, I mean, to me, it's like just so fundamentally important. And we're so focused on the end game that we forget that everything we do leading up to the solution is fundamentally critical.
It's interesting too that you say that, because, when you do fall in love with the problem, I think sometimes, especially when you're a innovator, when you're a creative type of personality, I think sometimes you can do this by accident. Now, I love the concept of being focused on that, but it's interesting because, at least from my experience, and I'd love to hear more about what you saw, and I'd love some stories to it. But when we did fall in love with the problem as a team, it was exciting to solve it, right? And we came up, like, we worked together better. We moved smoother. We had, like you said, we had less risk involved because everything just seemed to work better because we were all passionate about solving that problem. So I love that direction right there.
Yeah, and the nice thing about it too is if you're an organization built on ideas, well, everybody's got an opinion, everybody's got an idea, everybody's got a suggestion, but they're just like 1,000 points of light. Whereas when you get a well-framed opportunity and you can get a bunch of people inside the organization saying, whoa, this is awesome. If we could solve this, it would create incredible value for our customers. Now you get people passionate and rallying, and they're collaborating. The problem with ideas is you don't collaborate around ideas, but we could collaborate around opportunities. And that to me is the way you get that cultural shift.
Yeah, I would imagine that having this, being a little more innovative and being very open to the solution and falling in love with the problem is that it just creates this group of people, this culture of, we are expecting problems to show up one day so that we can stay relevant, so we can stay ahead of our competition, so that we can offer more value. And I just would imagine like the shift in a culture of people either just doing the same thing day after day versus, hey, I'm looking for new ways to serve my clients, new ways to serve our patients, new ways to serve our customers.
Stephen, I'm going to ask
new ways to serve.
I'm going to ask something of you because I think this is really good. Could you help us understand a little bit more? What does that process look like? Can you give us an example of what a company that you would work with, but just a typical company right now that's struggling with innovation? How would you work through that process with them? So if I'm a CEO right now or a leader of an organization trying to understand how to help get myself out of this spot, what does that process look like?
Well, I mean, the first step is to figure out directionally where you're going. So I'm not saying a specific, well-planned, strategic, directive, but what you need to do is make sure you understand where do we want everybody inside the organization moving towards. So I have something what I call my FAST innovation model, and FAST is an acronym that stands for focus, ask, shift, test. And those to me are the 4 big steps that you do pretty much in order, although you iterate around them a lot. So the first step would be focus. And focus is all around identifying what's most important to your customers. What do they value? What do they need that they don't even know they need? And how can you best serve them? So for me, this work is all around differentiation. And one of my strongly held beliefs is that you want to innovate where you differentiate. You can't be the best at everything. So what you need to do is figure out what you can do better than anyone else that's going to stand the test of time that no one else could copy and creates the greatest amount of value externally for your customers. And that's where you focus your energy. So if you get clarity around that is to me step number 1 is innovate where you differentiate, focus on what's going to create the greatest value, and then make sure every person inside the organization knows how you differentiate so that when, as they're trying to serve customers or serve their clients better, they know how to focus their energies. So that to me is step number 1.
And so I'm looking at, right now I'm looking at your website, and I love how you have the diagram there. And so we got focus, ask, shift, test, and then repeat. Is that right?
You repeat, you iterate. So once you figure out your differentiator, then what you identify is what problems you're going to solve or what opportunities are going to help you with that. Because what happens in a lot of cases is everybody starts off with what's an idea? Well, an idea is a solution. That's actually the 3rd step. The shift step is all around the solutions. It's all around the idea. But we need to go back and say, well, what's the real problem we're solving with that idea? And then we need to go further back and ask, is it valuable enough to even pursue? So we have a limited amount of time, money, energy, and resources inside of an organization. So we need to get laser focused on what's going to have the greatest impact externally and internally, what's going to have the greatest alignment with our capabilities and what we can bring to the market. So it's an iterative process, but you always want to start with the direction, know where you're going so that from there you can figure out what do we do in order to move the organization forward.
It's interesting because it seems pretty basic, right? It doesn't seem like that would be that complex. Just like a GPS, you got to know where you are before you can put in a destination of where you want to go. But it's interesting how quickly, as business owners, myself, I've found this many times. Like, we're helping other clients get there, but how quickly we become lost in our own path when we're trying to get somewhere. And I think you nailed it with just the first element and the second step, which is the focusing and then reframing that. And I love that. And when you talk about the ask, you say something here, and you've said it in a conversation we had prior to this, which I really liked. I'd not heard anybody say this before, but you said, don't it's not about thinking outside the box, but it's about finding a better box. Can you get into that for us?
Sure. So the whole ask step, that second step, is all around reframing. So once you figure out this is where we want to focus our energies, then you start asking yourself, what are the barriers that are getting in the way of our achieving this? So what are the opportunities that we could tap into? And then what we need to do is take whatever we think that opportunity is and put it through what I call a mental kaleidoscope. And it's basically just taking what we thought, is it really, do we want to, I'll give you a very, very simplistic example. Do we want to increase the number of customers that we have? A lot of people that I talk with, they say, okay, well, we want more customers. Now, think about it for a moment. If you say, I want more customers, what you're going to start thinking about is social media, cold calling, basically any kind of outreach to get people to know you who don't know you. So that's one box. But we could change the box. We could say it's not about customers, but it's actually about revenues. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, we could get revenues, but from my perspective, the fastest way to more revenues is not more customers. It's actually a deeper relationship with our existing customers. So how do we create more value for our existing customers so we can work more deeply with them? That to me is about revenues. But then we could reframe it again and say, well, maybe it's not even about revenues. Maybe it's about profits and margins. And I don't know what your experience is like, but mine is the least profitable customers are the ones who are the biggest pains in the butt. So maybe what we actually want is fewer customers. We want fewer customers that are more profitable, that we can do more deep work with. And that's actually a major shift I've made in my business over the past several years. I went from having 50, 60, 70 speeches with 60, 70 different companies a year to now I only do about a dozen speeches. And then I have a half dozen where we go really, really, really deep. But these are customers who are committed to really making that transformation happen. So I have much fewer number of customers, yet greater revenues and greater margins and fewer headaches.
And that's because you're giving a greater impact too. I mean, you're more invested in them because they're invested in you, right? So you're pouring into them deeper, and you're working together more like a team. And I mean, that makes a lot of sense, and you're absolutely right. I love that, because as soon as you said, I want more customers, all I thought in my head was, like I got scared. Like, no, I don't really want more customers, right? I'd like more money. More money would be good. I don't know if I want more customers, because you're absolutely right. And the thing too is, if we're not framed right, if we're not focused right, based on just that first step, more customers could really be a problem, like a real problem, where now we're really screwing up our current customers while we're trying to get new customers,
Yeah. And I think that's really, the whole point of, so don't think outside the box, find a better box. The point is, it's not the expansiveness of our thinking. We think that we have to think really broadly, but sometimes we need to actually get a little narrower, because the brain loves constraints. And this is sort of a paradox that a lot of people don't understand, but the brain actually wants constraints. If I gave you a blank sheet of paper, let's say you were an employee for a large organization, I said, okay, give me your ideas on how to improve the business. You can come up with hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of useless, irrelevant, low-value ideas. But if I said, here's how we differentiate, and this is the specific opportunity I want you to focus on, well, now what happens is our brain automatically starts getting clarity, and it will eliminate any of the noise, and it helps us provide much better solutions. There's an exercise I do that is an absolute blast that demonstrates this, and people are always blown away by it, but consistently, people like constraints. The brain wants a box. I know some people say, throw out the box. There is no box. There has to be a box, because that's the way most human beings think.
It's because it's safe, right? our brain wants to protect us, and it wants to keep us safe. It doesn't want us in a challenging spot. Even though we like to be challenged, like us as individuals, that brain, that prehistoric part of our brain's going, nope, there's too much unknowns there, and that means that there could be danger, right? So we're going to stay away from that.
But
so
it loves to solve problems too.
Yes,
and this comes
that's
down
what I'm
to what I shared with you, Rigo. And Stephen, I don't know if you've ever heard about this this playground study that they actually watched children, the way that they played at the playground with and without a fence around the playground. And the playground that had no fence, the kids like stuck to the center where all the equipment is. And when there was a fence, the kids actually played in the entire area of this playground because they knew where their boundaries were. They knew where they were safe. I love this study, and it applies right here so well.
Absolutely. I think that's a great example. And the other reason why we need the constraints is the problem is, and I said this before, is what ends up happening is our past experiences influence the decisions we're going to make in the future. And so if I don't give you any constraints, your natural tendency is going to be to go to your past experiences, your past memories, and you're going to pull solutions, ideas, suggestions from the past. The issue is it might not reflect reality today or tomorrow for your organization. And so the constraints help you move from our past to what we need for the future. And so it's just a great technique. Those I call it the power of positive constraints.
I love that. There's a question that's came in here. I want to put it out there. And it's, how would you create a culture of innovation in a global enterprise that has been doing well for a long time, but times have changed? We see this a lot too, and I'm not surprised this question has come out. So with these global enterprises who are doing well right now, right? Change. How do you help culture change in an organization like that?
There's a few different ways that you can do this. One of the things that I found, though, is that what we need to do is make sure we are not just always going to the same people. So a lot of times organizations hire people who fit the mold, people from the same industry. If I'm a sales organization, I'm going to hire salespeople. If I'm in the hospitality industry, I hire people from the hospitality industry. But here's the thing that we know is that breakthroughs and shifts, actually the best solutions come from somebody outside your industry, outside your area of expertise. So one way is to, first of all, start embracing divergent points of view. We need to embrace the fact that sometimes somebody outside of our industry or area of expertise is going to have value. And if you start with that as just an opening premise, then from there you build the culture around collaboration. You build the organization around being able to get the best solutions from wherever they might exist, not necessarily the team that's tasked with the problem. And so it's why I'm a big fan of something called open innovation, for example, where we can actually crowdsource potential solutions from anyone, anywhere, not necessarily somebody from inside the company or from somebody inside the industry. So there's 1,000 different things it's obviously a complex challenge, but that's always a great place to start.
That's interesting. That's awesome.
I
love that.
Even coming up with ideas, you've got innovation. Yeah, just all these different approaches to how we can solve these problems by just having like different people. I really enjoy that, and hadn't thought about the crowdsourcing. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, that's why not do it for funding? Why can't you do it for ideas? Interesting enough, we do this today. I think if we're really being honest, a lot of times, like in social media, in our own little personal lives, we do this. We put it out. What do you think? This is what we're doing. What's your thoughts? And we're looking for opinion, right? And sometimes we're getting opinion or getting advice from people we don't know. I mean, get on an Amazon review, right? What are all those reviews? It's an outsourcing of opinion and detail that's helping you make a decision. So that makes perfect sense, Stephen. I love that.
Yeah, I will add a caveat to this, which is when you do crowdsourcing, you have to do it the right way. So a lot of people think that, just a very simple example. So when the Deepwater Horizon oil rig exploded back in April 20th, 2010, they tried a whole bunch of different innovations to stop the flow of the oil. And then they decided, well, we're going to try to ask the crowd. And they created a website and they asked people, what is your best solution on how to stop the flow of the oil? Now, the problem was it's a big, broad, abstract, and complex problem. And they received 123,000 submissions in a matter of weeks, yet none of them had anything to do with the final solution. So crowdsourcing, when it's done wrong, actually leads to a lot of wasted energy. So you've got to get that right balance when you do it right. So putting something out there isn't necessarily the same thing as, effectively using open innovation.
No, it makes sense. Yeah, no, absolutely. So can I switch gears here a little bit, Lorianne?
Yes, please. I think I know which direction you're going in, which is what I'm trying to edge us in a different direction.
Well, yeah, because we've done a lot of talks here, and I love this conversation, and we're talking about the company, but now I want to get more down into the individual because, listening to your story, the passion to do what you do today came from recognizing that all of this innovation and all of these cost-cutting practices and the things that you were doing were causing the loss of job. Now, by all means, a company is now making more revenue and they're doing better, but you wanted to be a part of the other side, right? Of building people up. And so you're an author of 5 books, and one of your books, Goal-Free Living. I'm curious on this one. We talked briefly about it, but help me understand this now as we get into the individual, because you impact people. In the end, that's what you're impacting in what you do.
Yeah, that's, for me, I wrote Goal-Free Living back in 2005, so it's a long time ago. And even that book in itself was sort of a goal-free experience. So the premise of Goal-Free Living, just to step back and give you some background on it, is that we've been told we need to have 5-year goals, 3-year goals, 1-year goals, 6-month goals, whatever it is. And that's how we're taught to live. That's how we become successful. And so what I ended up doing is my first book came out in 2001. In 2003, I decided to write a second book on innovation for the individual. So it was like, how do we apply the concepts that we use in large organizations to the individual? And so I hopped in my car and I started driving around the country, literally 90 days in my car with no plans. I actually didn't know where I was going to be. I didn't even know where I was staying each night. And keep in mind, this is 2003. So, being able to, book something on your phone wasn't really an easy thing. So each night I'd stay in a different random hotel that I would book. And I interviewed 150 creative people. And the thing that was so fascinating is the people who had the most creative lives, the people who just were really fully self-expressed, didn't have the same relationship to goals that other people had. And so that's how the book sort of was born, is maybe there's a different path to quote unquote success. How can we live a life that's experiential, where we allow it to unfold as much as possible? And I call it meandering with purpose, which basically means allow life to unfold, gather new insights, and then course correct as you get some new information.
And you were meandering essentially around the country while with these, you just got in a car and certain people that you were interviewing. I mean, did you know who you wanted to interview for the book? I'm curious.
So this is the crazy thing. Literally 5 days before I hop in my car, I talked to a buddy of mine and he said, wait, you're going to drive around the country, sit on the beach and write a book about people without talking to these people. It's like, why don't you interview people? So I got connected with Fast Company magazine. Back then they had something called the Circle of Friends. And so Heath Rowe, who was running that, he organized a couple of events, one in Houston, one in Philadelphia, one in New Jersey. So I did a few of those events, but then as I drove across the country, I just started posting things on my blog, did some press releases, and I every day was getting requests from people saying, hey, come meet me, come meet me, come meet me. And I tried to accommodate it. I got 150 people by the end of the 90 days. So it was a really, it was a great, powerful experience to just let things unfold. And again, the book was not supposed to be about goals or not having goals, but it was really a book on innovation for individuals. So it was an interesting interesting experience.
Oh, I love that. I'm curious is there a particular interview that stands out amongst the 150?
Yeah, actually, my favorite, and I see there's a comment here that they're the people who work to live and not live to work. And I would say that's true, but here's the paradoxical thing is sometimes the more you love your work, the more successful you are by even our relative standards, that, you know, money. So the person who I thought really, I love this guy, Doug Bush. When I met him, he was the chief information officer for Intel. And so obviously a clearly successful guy. And what I loved is he just had these wide ranges of things. So he would, for example, he liked to go hiking and he'd sleep in wet, cold, sleeping bags in a tent while it's raining out. And he felt that these extremes, this cold, wet, had him appreciate, being able to, work in an office, but working in an office also made him appreciate the outdoors. And so these contrasts really helped him have a wider range of experiences. And he shared with me how his life unfolded and how he ended up being, the chief information officer of Intel. And then he went into another role, which was a partnership with another organization. Just fascinating guy. But there were so many of them that I found really interesting. And again, they were all financially successful, but they related to money differently. If I could just share one quick story here, just very quickly.
Please,
this one is
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I love this story. If I ask people, does money make you happier? Is there a correlation between money and happiness? And most people probably would think it's a trick question and say no. The reality is there's a very strong correlation between happiness and money, but it's not a causation. Here's the crazy thing. There's some really fascinating studies done where they showed that the people who were happiest attracted wealth to them because they loved what they were doing. They surround themselves with a lot of people. The people wanted to work with them. So money did not cause or create happiness. Happiness caused or created wealth. And so you can be goal-free, love what you're doing, and still be successful. Now, it's not do what you love and the money will follow. I don't believe that at all. You have to be very purposeful about the value you create in the market. But that's, I just think that's really fascinating.
I love that, Steve. By the way, if you'd have asked me, I'd have said, no, money, by all means. When you have, I've learned this a long time ago, money buys a lot of things. So money is not the happiness. Money's the tool that allows you to build the environment that gains happiness, right? So absolutely. And when I stopped looking at money as an item that owned me and started looking at it as a tool, it was interesting because even making less, I had more, right? I was able to do more. It's just when I stopped looking at it as a valuation of who I am. Make no mistake, what you create in your income is definitely a good sign of your being successful or not. But what I found is that doesn't necessarily mean anything, because I could be making $500,000 a year, be terrible with money. It's running me and I have nothing to show for it, right? This is how some people can do amazing 20, 30 years in their life under just typical, every average American medium household incomes. And you're right. When I've met those types of people, Stephen, you know what you find? You find people that are not owned by it, right? The money, they're not stuck on these goals that I have to hit this number. It's, I'm going to keep moving forward and I'm living life and I'm just using money as a tool. So I love that story. And it's amazing what you learn when you get to speak to people, right? That's what I love doing this. Get people's stories and you hear more and more.
It's a great story. And you can even see, like, Stephen, your energy changed as soon as we started talking about this topic also. So I know that we have to dive a little bit deeper into this particular book and this particular topic. What's something else that was surprising to you when you wrote, or even when you were doing the research on the book?
Surprising. There are actually quite a few surprising things. Here's what was interesting. Is so what I did was this is back in the days of cassette tapes. So if anybody remembers what those
Yes.
are, And I would literally put the cassette tape, you push the pause and record button.
Yep. I had some sweet mix ones, man. Put the little toilet paper down in the holes and then make your mixtapes.
Yeah, so I recorded every single interview, and then I sat down and I listened to every interview, and I started compiling what were the common themes and threads amongst these people. And I identified 12 different themes or threads, and one of those 12 was they had a different relationship to goals. And anytime I'd show people the list of the 12 themes, nobody cared about anything except for that one. And I called it Goal-Free Living. And so that's how the book ended up becoming what it is. And I guess for me, what was interesting is I assumed, so this wasn't in the writing of the book, but this was after the book came out. I assumed that the audience for this book was going to be the recovering goalaholics, the people who were burned out, stressed out, working so hard, and they just felt like, this book gives me a breath of fresh air. But that was not actually the audience who was interested in the book, because the people who love their goals, I guess, just love their goals. It's a personality thing. And so the people who really loved the book were the people who lived this way already, and the book validated them. They could share it with their friends and say, hey, there's another way to live. And so that to me was, just really fascinating to see who resonated with the book and who just doesn't like the book. And I remember, a number of people will say, if you're not pissing some people off, you're probably not doing it right. I know I pissed off a lot of people, but hey, there you go. That to me was the whole point of the book.
So I guess you were doing it right.
In multiple lanlanguages, right,
Yes,
Stephen?
in multiple languages.
Not just in American. You were pissing them off in Ukrainian and Russian.
Pissing
and
them
look
off
at that.
globally.
Which one's
Yeah,
that?
so that one's Indonesian.
There you go.
So
You were
that's,
pissing them off in Indonesia. What is the language of Indonesia?
Don't ask me languages. That one's Russian, I believe. So yeah, we've got a whole bunch of different languages that we pissed people off in, but that's fine.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You know what? That's a new goal for me. I'm just saying that's a new goal.
Be goal-free?
No, to see if I can piss people off in different
people
languages.
off.
I mean, listen, you got somewhere. To me, that's pretty awesome. Listen, Stephen, that's, for somebody that enjoys creating content and likes this aspect of thought leadership and discussion, like, I love this kind of stuff. I really do find a lot of value in authors who can put the thought on paper. I think that's awesome. And I would love that. I think that's incredible to be able to have a book published in different languages. So I really truly mean that as a goal. Like, I would love to people off in another language. That means I'm doing something right. I'm pumped about that idea.
Yeah, but the whole point of our talk, Rigo, is about goal-free living.
Yeah,
You're
but that
already
one
at
just
your goal.
just gave me a really great idea. I'm like, I don't know,
with
man.
goal-free
That's kind of
living,
cool.
I'd like to just add one quick point before we move on, though, because this is actually an important point. Is
Steven's like, we gotta get past this.
No, actually, I want to build on it, because goal-free is not the same as goal-less. So goal-less is basically like sitting in your butt, eating bonbons and watching Jerry Springer type of thing. And I'm not talking about that. Goal-free means that you have a sense of direction, not a specific destination, and then you meander with purpose without attachment towards that outcome. So you can still have paths that you're going down. You can still have things that call you forward. To piss people off in multiple languages might be something that calls you forward.
Yeah.
But don't be so locked into it looking a particular way. Maybe it's not a book. Maybe it's, this show here. You get really controversial, and you have translations in multiple languges. And
yeah, the translations will do that. Like the closed caption, maybe some dub overs. Yeah. No.
Okay,
you're
so
absolutely right.
not goal-free. Just you have a destination. You're living on purpose. And you're almost, when you say like meandering, I think of that as like following the clues is what I say to clients. Like whatever shows up, like, oh, this looks interesting. Let me turn this rock over. Is that sort of like what you're talking about a little bit more so that we can share with the audience?
Yeah, I love that. So, think about, some of these major highways. When I lived in Massachusetts, there was a stretch of the Mass Pike where I think it was between used to be exit 2 and 3. I think they renumbered them, but it was like 30 miles between exits. So if you are on the highway with no exits, basically you've got nowhere to go other than keep on moving forward, even if there might have been an opportunity off to the side that you were interested in. So to me, meandering with purpose is saying, don't just take a highway, but find all the little roads, drive down the side roads, give yourself lots of options, allow yourself to change direction. So it's not about the specific destination, but it's the sense of direction, and then you course correct. So as you get new information, you say, you know what, I love this. I want to do more of this. Okay, well, go down that path a little bit. I don't like doing this. Great, move in a slightly different direction. So instead of going straight forward like this, it's sort of like you're sort of meandering, and you're going to end up somewhere different, but it's based on real world information, real world insights, because you're paying attention. The problem with a goal obsession is we put blinders on, confirmation bias kicks in, and we only see evidence that supports what we believe to be true. Therefore, our goal's the right direction until we hit our goal and we say, oh, this wasn't it. Okay.
It? Yep.
Next.
Yeah.
No.
But I like the analogy of the highway, the Mass Pike. I'm obviously here in New England. I know exactly what stretch of road you're talking about. But you're right. It's get off the highway and take those back roads to your destination. And just like you said, like you drive down some road and it's like, oh, like this is like a dead end. This is I don't really like this one so much. Course correcting. That's a great analogy. We should all be taking some back roads every once in a while. Just get off the highway. Try something new. Try something different.
My our friend of the show and who was a part of this in the beginning, her name is Krista. She used to call it shiveting. It's a shift and a pivot. And I always loved that, the way that she said that, and because it's very true. Now, a question for you, Stephen. Do you see small companies having an opportunity to make a faster course correction than, let's say, a larger company? I mean, it sounds really obvious, but I'm not sure. Is it that obvious, right? Can larger companies, 100, 200 plus employees, 1,000 plus employees, when does it get to that point where it becomes very difficult for organizations without the right culture to make a shift when they're headed in the wrong direction?
Well, I think, this is sort of the lifelong debate in the innovation space is, are small companies better equipped to be nimble? And I actually don't think that's true. Small companies tend to have, especially really small companies, tend to have fewer structures, processes, systems. Therefore, yeah, they can change, but not having those structures and systems don't give them any scale, don't give them any leverage. And so if you're a large organization that has scale, that has leverage, then you can actually, invest in those changes because maybe you have a lot of technology. Well, great. Technology is a great way of reinforcing the past, but when you make changes to technology, it reinforces the future. Cultural changes, all these things, I think, especially big companies, have a deeper level of competency and capability to leverage. So they can move in multiple directions because they don't have just one specialty, but they've got lots of different things they can be good at to help evolve over time. So I don't think it's a small versus large. I think it's really the mindset is, are we going to be nimble or are we not? Are we going to have the ability to adjust or are we not? Now, in some cases, admittedly, big companies have infrastructure. I mean, maybe it's buildings that you're investing in. I know, obviously, during the pandemic, buildings weren't exactly one of the things that companies needed. So they're rethinking the level of work. Well, what does that mean in terms of investments that you might have made in physical infrastructure? But aside from that, I think every organization has the ability to be nimble when it's done correctly.
I love that. I love it. Now, that was a good answer because I've seen pros and cons on both ends. And you're right. As a small organization, it's tough. It's tough when you don't have the processes, you don't have the funding, you don't have the ability to make a move, even if you have the right understanding, but at the same time, it could go the other way as well. But you're right. I think it really does come down to that mindset. As a leader, Stephen, in a role of developing a culture of innovators, okay? So whether large or small, what could you share as to some of the the elements, some of the skill sets that a leader should start to implement and learn and grow from, so that they can understand how to recognize innovators in the team, how to recognize when they're stuck in a box, right? Because it's easy to say, and of course, hiring someone like yourself, obviously it's going to make things a lot easier because you're saying, no, you're in the same box. You're not in a new box, right? But for an organization, sorry, go ahead, Stephen.
No, I think that, the first step is just to recognize that everyone does have the potential to contribute to innovation. So it's not we have innovators and the rest are, not. We might contribute to innovation in a different way, because innovation is actually an end-to-end process. It's an end-to-end process that starts with the issue, problem, challenge, or opportunity and ends with the creation of value. So in order to do that, we need to make sure that we have people who are great at data and numbers and analytics to make sure we're targeting the right opportunities. We need to have people who are great at implementation. We don't think of them as innovators, but I think I think they're very important to the innovation process. So I think that's, first thing to just recognize that.
I love that. Okay. No, and then that makes sense. It really doesn't. You're not trying to single anyone out, but understanding that everybody plays a role. And it's so true, right? Every position in a company plays a role. When you look at the organizations that have done very well, they're the organizations that have, they have asked from groundskeepers and janitors to the highest level executives, right? They're not excluding anybody from certain questions that really matter about how a company is being portrayed or how it's building or whatnot. And I love that. So we've talked a little bit about, about where you have come from, understanding the steps of the process of focus, ask, shift, and test. I like that, by the way, FAST. That's a great acronym. We've talked a little bit about the idea of goal-free living. So I have a new goal-free goal, and I'm pumped about that one. But now we talk about best practices are stupid. I really want to kind of touch base on this. And by the way, for all those of you guys who are watching and you want to know a little bit more about Stephen Shapiro, we're going to drop his website in, and we'll make sure to let you guys know where you can find him. And on these books, of course, they're everywhere where books are sold from what I can see. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all that good stuff. But I really like this one, and I was hoping we can get a few minutes on it. Best practices are stupid, because I love the title. Totally agree with you, but we may be thinking two different things.
Yeah, so again, this wasn't necessarily a book. The title of the book came later in the process. As I was writing the book, what I realized is that replication is not innovation. So there's three reasons why I think best practices are stupid. One is, if you're copying what someone else is doing, you're basically following someone. So you can't, especially for your differentiators, trying to replicate what somebody else is doing. By the time you implement their best practice, they're on to the next practice. But that's okay. That's pretty obvious. Here's the one which I think is my favorite one when it comes to this, is what's called the undersampling of failure. The undersampling of failure. And basically what that means, it's sort of the cousin of survivor bias. And what it means is, when we study best practices, when we go to a conference and somebody gets up on the stage and gives a speech, we did this and we did this, I guarantee you, for that one success that somebody talked about in a book, that one success that somebody talked about from the stage, there are 1,000 people who did exactly the same thing and failed. We don't talk about them. So that undersampling of failure is another reason why we don't want to focus just on best practices. And then the third one is, what works for one organization doesn't necessarily work for another one. So we need to understand context. And I think those are just three reasons why I just think it's important for us to really be innovating the way we innovate. We need to think differently about the way we innovate, and we need to do what's right for us, for our culture, for our organization, for our differentiator.
That's awesome. It's good stuff. Lorianne, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say there's just so much that you've shared with us, and one of the things that comes to mind for me is, I would imagine that there has got to be an exercise that gets people in that creativity or innovation mode versus showing up in the boardroom and like, all right, here we are to solve this problem again and again. We're using our past experience to solve that problem. Are there? And well, actually, you did mention it. Like some exercises, but I was just wondering, like what you do is to get people's minds just to start thinking differently on the regular.
Yeah, so there's really so many different things that you could do. I'll give you one goofy one, but it's from my Goal-Free Living book. So we talked about it, and so I'll just mention it because it really is powerful. Is the problem is we see the world through our own eyes, and therefore we're limited. But if we were to step into the shoes of someone else, we're going to start hearing, seeing, smelling things differently. So, for example, ask yourself, how would Walt Disney solve this problem? Or make believe for a day you're Walt Disney, and you're going to see experiences. You're going to see things that Walt would say, that's terrible. That's a terrible customer experience. What if we did it this way? Make believe that you're Mozart, and you're going to, all of a sudden music and symphonies or whatever it might be, Rembrandt, you're going to start seeing paintings. All those things are going to give you, Steve Jobs once said, creativity is just having enough dots to connect. Creativity is just having enough dots to connect, dots being ideas or experiences. And the reason creative people are so is they've either had more experiences or they've thought more about their experiences than other people. And so this process of trying new things, seeking out adventure, making believe you're someone else is a way to collect new dots. And as long as you process those experiences, you'll now start collecting those dots, and that will help you be more creative.
Thank you.
I got one for you,
I'm glad
Stephen.
I asked that.
Yeah, me too, Lorianne. WWTGD. What would that guy do? Huh? There you go. What would that guy do? I honestly, when you said Disney, at first I'm like, okay, didn't expect that. And I started thinking about this from a customer service perspective, like, yeah, okay. As as you're looking at different innovators, I'm thinking that's actually a really, really great way to look at it. Like, what a way to expand your mind and get you out there and open up. So, Stephen, this has been incredible. I'm really, really happy that you came on. I was trying to touch base on like everything that you're doing. And of course that's not possible within an hour, but I think you did a really good job being a good sport with us. And I really, really appreciate it. So I want to give you the opportunity, a little final word. You can share with our listeners and our audience, but again, I just want to thank you so much for bringing your wisdom and your experience on and sharing it with our audience. But before we kind of get out, like I said, I'd just like to give you the opportunity to just kind of share your final thoughts with everybody.
Yeah, so first I want to acknowledge somebody who's been posting some comments on LinkedIn. Somebody who said, like, as an innovator myself, I struggle with goals. So I just adjust with the way things roll. And I really, I like that perspective. And sometimes there's a great book. It's not my book. I wish I wrote this book. It's called Orbiting the Giant Hairball by Gordon MacKenzie. So if you're an innovator and you feel like you're working in an organization that doesn't value you, buy this book. It'll be the best gift you can give yourself, because I think we all have a creative potential. We all have an innovative potential. But I think sometimes our environment doesn't allow us to thrive. And so the question is, what can you do to shift that environment, either by making changes where you're working or change where you work? So I think but I think for many people, the ability to be creative, to think broadly is going to get people excited. And we're in an environment right now where organizations are operating out of fear. We're worried about inflation. We're worried about recession. We're worried about war. We're worried about, pandemics. We need to inject some life, some fun, some passion, and some growth into organizations. I'll leave you with a quote from Jack Welch. He said many years ago, he said, for too long, we've been squeezing lemons. Now's the time for us to grow more lemons. Recession's coming does not mean you pull back. It's a time to grow more lemons. Focus on growth. Don't just cut. You can never cut your way to success.
I love it. Thank you
Brilliant.
so much.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Very well said. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stephen. I appreciate it. All right, well, Donnie, let's give Stephen a nice round of applause from our big studio audience as we kind of wrap things up. I'm telling you, man, we came ready, Stephen. We came ready. So listen, you guys, if you like this program, if you like the content that we're bringing to you, please do us a favor and become a part of our community. We've got something really special for you, too. We have now created a community platform where you can get on, chat, get involved in a lot of free training, and get access to content like Stephen Shapiro and understand a little bit more about him. As you know, we are always bringing this stuff to the platform for you, but we want you to join our community by texting 316-799-8052. Donnie, you going to pop that up? Thank you very much. Text to 316-799-8052. That gets you in our community. What's that mean? I text you when we go live. Text you when we have something to give away. That's it. And it is nothing else. It's not a spammer, but we want you to stay connected. Also, please do us a favor. Drop some love for Stephen. Let him know you appreciate him being here, because we want guys like Stephen to keep coming and sharing things with you. So let him know. Follow him on LinkedIn. We're going to all his information with the chat so you guys know what's going on. And Lorianne, we've got a lot of great speakers booked. Speakers like Stephen and others. Oh, man, I am pumped about it. Stephen, you're going to have to keep your eye on it. And I can't wait to see you guys all back here every Thursday, 1 p.m. Central Time for the Contagious Leadership Podcast. You guys be blessed. Take care of yourself. We'll see you next Thursday.